put down that bong and get lost with us for the next 15 minutes in an amazing, the amazing Shit Chat Show with us, Mrs. Mel Gibson and the Heretic, as we explore the shit that we heard while surfing the internet. Yes, that's it. The amazing conspiracy Shit Chat Show.
Michael Jackson.
It's a sound, don't worry about it. It's a sound.
Dunno, can you electrocute the ghost?
No.
Come into my wife, she's got so much love to show you. Hi, I'm Mrs. Mel Gibson, and to my right, or to your left, dear listeners, is Heretic. Right, mate?
Hello.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Conspiracy Shit Chat.
Our motto is, if you want to change the world, throw a better party.
Or, if you want to change the world, change your pants first. Yeah, I've been twerking, Heretic. I'm not sure what that is, but I've been, I broke a window trying it.
I've been Birkin. So what are we going to be talking about today then?
Well, we've got an intriguing guest calling in.
And we're talking about books.
Books, man! Books!
Also this time we'll be talking about some curious artifacts known as motion picture movies.
Kino, das ist ein Kinofilm.
This is going to be fun. Having fun is really important. So I'm going to be unbuttoning my stuff and you're going to do your boogie dance.
Thanks, Sybil. Sybil Edmonds, of course, the whistle-blowing totty. Bet you like her to blow your bloody whistle, wouldn't you, Heretic?
There's going to be the masters and they're going to be slavery. I'm like, huh? What is that?
Google Plus, ladies and gentlemen, I bet you're bloody enjoying it, aren't you? Why, there's no need to press just one button to get your message inbox. No, let's have 6 button presses.
How about no privacy?
We don't want no privacy.
How about Google Plus taking over your web browser?
You told me a little scenario that happened to you while you were having a cheeky little wank, Heretic.
Well, I was looking at some Japanese porn.
Kimochi!
I noticed there was a little icon underneath the player, and when I hovered my mouse over it, it said, share it on Google Plus that you like this video.
I see it as Google's attempt at creating Foucault's panopticon. Now you could be looking at anything, especially us two. Bloody hell! Imagine if there was some sort of retroactive law whereby they can go back in time and piece together any kind of narrative they want from what you've looked at. Plus the aesthetic qualities, it's very bland looking. Like rather than the individualism of the early YouTube days, which was fun and you were very distinguishable from every other channel. But now that's gone. We've been collectivized. But I'm sure soon there'll be some kind of hate speech function. If you make a comment and it's perceived as hate speech, there may be some sort of strike system that they're going to introduce.
Grand Theft Auto 5 came out. It's like the biggest selling entertainment product in history.
Don't you mean biggest stolen? I stole it. What do you like about the game, Heretic?
I like its criticism of the entitlement generation.
Did you?
And I like liberal, impotent rage.
Subversive. Yeah, like you're playing it. Sometimes it's the subtext that has the real meat rather than the thing that's being expressed literally, on the surface.
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand's got some tits in his hands. Russell Brand, the Jesus of the Top Shop set, has laid down the law. In other words, like break the law. Revolution. He thinks we're going to have a socialist, egalitarian utopia, Russell Brand style. Would you be up for that? Something like that?
Every revolution that's ever happened in history has usually involved lots and lots of innocent people being massacred, and then you've had to have a Caesar to come along and sort it all out. It's never good, is it?
He's got this idea in his head that revolution in the 21st century would be everyone just suddenly becoming conscious, like synthesized as one, and all going in a united fashion. No, government, you're going to stand down and fuck off, and then they just fuck off, and then we all start again. That's the way to do it, is it? No, we're going to get shot, aren't we, if we attempt to breach the Bastille, as it were. What's annoying about the Russell Brand thing is that he said a lot of things that were true as well. Like, yeah, everything isn't working properly. But on the other hand, he's advocating for socialism, essentially. And I'm sure he knows full well that people don't really know what that means. Not his fans, really. They're too busy going to gigs.
Or maybe he doesn't even know. Henrik from Red Ice Radio, he did a fantastic, impassioned analysis of Russell Brand's appearance on Paxman.
Henrik comes from Sweden, and Sweden is a totalitarian nightmare. People assume that Sweden's this lovely utopia. But no, Sweden is like the totalitarian model for the EU. The EU want everywhere to be like Sweden because it's horrible.
We had the UKIP conference.
What happened? Let me guess, Godfrey Bloom. What's he done now?
He called women sluts. And he was set upon by a quote-unquote journalist, Michael Crick.
And in Michael Crick's hand was a magazine, a UKIP publication. And Michael Crick said, Mr. Bloom, there are no black faces on the front of this magazine.
When he said black faces, did he mean people weren't blacked up, or there wasn't any?
I wasn't sure. He said there were no
people
black
from ethnic
faces.
minorities. Yeah, it sounded racist, didn't it?
There's no blackface.
Where's the minstrel?
What does he mean? What did he mean? Bloom said, how dare you? That's racist. So Godfrey Bloom just sort of storms off, followed by Mr. Crick, saying, what do you mean? It's just a legitimate question. And Godfrey Bloom snatches the magazine out of Crick's hand and twats him round the head with it.
Also during the conference, was it the Times newspaper? They printed on the front page a photo of Nigel Farage giving his speech.
Looked like a Hitler moustache.
It looked like a Hitler moustache. But then by some bizarre coincidence, the BBC accidentally did the same thing.
What are you trying to say?
And the BBC were like, oh, it was just an error. But you were saying the other day, you think UKIP needs a counter to Nigel Farage.
Like, for every laurel, you need a Hardy. Do you know what I mean? Just someone with that sort of charisma, that clout.
But I like Paul Nuttall.
Yeah.
And Tim Baker.
Yeah.
He's like the Jack Russell of UKIP.
And in May, the European elections are up. You're going to vote or you're going to do the Russell Brand thing?
Tip over a bin.
I've never voted before in my life, and I wasn't going to this time round either, but I've got this feeling that there's a wild card out there. Might as well vote this once. If they don't win, well, you're just going to get more of the same anyway.
Well, when you start to understand how many of our laws are made in Brussels, you realise that the European elections are the real elections.
Yeah. So really, it's time to stock up. You've got to get into survivalist mode. Buy some food. Buy tins of dried food that you can keep for a while.
Sorry, are we listening to Jeff Rintz now?
I've got like tins of alphabet spaghetti. Loads of them. I'm ready. I'm fucking braced. Yeah.
Just get a gun.
Just get a gun. I can't get a gun in this country.
Mm.
Oh, the phone's ringing, Heretic.
Conspiracy hotline.
Conspiracy hotline. Hello, is that Keelan Balderson?
No,
Is it rocking Mr. E?
I don't even know who that is.
Who the bloody hell is it then?
It's Tom Secker, and I'm regretting calling in now.
The last time we had you on the show, you were brilliant,
Thank you.
and you added a touch of class. So,
He put strawberries on the cream, didn't he?
yeah,
No, he put cream on the strawberries.
yeah,
That's what I meant.
yeah. Well, since we last spoke to you, you got your own podcast, haven't you?
I do, yes. I have a podcast called Clandestine.
Aha. And it's very good, actually, isn't
It's
it?
very good.
You used to give us feedback on the shows, didn't you?
And may I say it was largely negative?
It was largely negative. I suggested to you, Tom, that if you weren't happy with us constantly talking about Jews and Nazis, you could get your own show where you could, talk about your brony fetish and hemp shoes and what have you. Then you went off and you made a bloody good podcast.
Are you trying to take some credit for this?
I think he is.
Fair enough. It's not like I have a massive audience. Take whatever credit you like.
Do you want to plug yourself a little?
Okay. I have two main websites. The first is investigatingtheterror.com, which is got all my 7/7 stuff on it, and all of my other terrorism research stuff on it. And my newer website is spyculture.com, which is also where the podcast is.
And how about if people just want to listen to your podcast on YouTube?
Type in clandestine. It's the word clandestine, or clandestine, with an M instead of an N at the end.
It's very sly. It's very slick. And
I didn't come up with it.
No, who would that have been?
That was Aaron. Aaron who came up with that. Age of Transitions, yeah.
AgeOfTransitions.com, yes. I don't know if you're aware of this, but conspiracy shit chat is banned in Israel and Germany. Recently, there was the controversy in France with the French comedian Dieudonné. Have you heard of that?
What, waving his hand around in some fashion that for some reason people are saying this is racist. I don't really get it.
They call it a quenelle, don't they? An inverted Nazi salute. And I'm thinking, well...
Inverted Nazi?
That's what they call it, an inverted Nazi salute. So it's not a Nazi salute then, is it?
Or he's like an extremely pro-Jewish fascist, which I understand I understand he isn't. So I don't really know what how that works.
He's just been banned from coming over to the UK by Theresa May. Did you hear about that, Tom?
I didn't, but I suppose she's got to keep herself busy somehow.
I did want to talk to you a little bit about freedom of speech more generally. Do you think it's important?
I don't think it really exists, so no. I mean, I don't understand what it is people mean when they say freedom of speech. Honestly, I don't know. It's one of those phrases that I've just never really grasped what it is that people were saying.
I don't think that we have freedom of speech because I think there are things that we're certainly encouraged not to talk about, and you can actually be imprisoned for saying certain things about certain things.
But we do at least still have the pretense of freedom of speech to a degree in this country, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I think a lot of countries have the pretense of freedom of speech, but has it ever actually existed anywhere? I don't think the problem with that phrase is the speech bit. We know what speech is, but what is freedom? And as soon as you start defining it, and lots of people love defining freedom and defining it in lots of different ways, you get into that whole squalid world of, I don't know, professional philosophy.
I can say, well, I believe in freedom of speech, but this goes beyond the pale. This is extreme. But obviously that's a person's own definition. And for me, freedom of speech is kind of the last bulwark of civilization. Once that's gone, then you got open tyranny, haven't you?
Do you actually believe in freedom of speech in the literal sense? You believe anyone should be able to say or publish anything?
I'm not saying we necessarily have freedom of speech, but I believe in the ideal of freedom of speech because, as I just pointed out, if you start putting limits on it, who defines the limit?
Of course. And all these other excuses that are given for discouraging people from talking about things or for censorship. I get it, but what kind of society doesn't say there are certain things that we consider poisonous to our society and therefore we censor or try and exclude them? I don't know how you would have a society without that exclusive quality. You can idealize the notion of freedom all you like, but practically speaking, for a society to be a definable society, it must have some rules and limitations, otherwise it would have no limits and therefore to call it a society would be a nonsense. The whole problem with the anarchists, you know. And I know how much you hate the anarchists, because you're a closet fascist.
Closet fascist.
Half in, half out, you know.
There was an interesting word you used when you introduced the topic, though, Heretic. You said allowed, when we're allowed to use freedom of speech, which implies that freedom of speech is something that is issued to us under the auspices of the state, that it's something that is kind of given to you, and therefore implies that it can be taken away from you also.
Yeah, and you've hit upon a very important thing there, because if freedom of speech means anything, it means the ability to resist state censorship. Mm-hmm. You know, that's its power. That's the value in that idea and that ideal. Like a lot of these things, a lot of typically individual freedoms, they are great as philosophies of resistance against tyranny and against the state. I have no problem with them at all like that. I'm just saying, in order to have a specific sort of society, I think you have to start with the question, what sort of society do we want? And then you say, we try and build that. Rather than saying, let's just have a whole fucking free-for-all and have no rules and just sort of see what happens. I mean, that doesn't... Like I say, this is my whole problem with the anarchists, and I say this as an anarchist, is that that's what an awful lot of them believe.
Yeah.
And I just think that's no kind of plan whatsoever. It's a sort of pointless political philosophy, and surely in this day and age, if you actually have that attitude, you'll just end up getting swept along in the tide with the rest of them.
Tom, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about history.
What are you bothering with that for? It's just a thing of the past, isn't it?
History.
Nietzsche said that the historian, he spends so much time looking backwards that eventually he starts to think backwards. When you look at large swathes of history, it's very tempting to see history as a narrative, as a story.
I think it's fair to talk about history in terms of several competing narratives, because I think that's what history is. If you reduce it to one narrative, I totally think that's a mistake, yeah. I mean, humanity isn't one thing, is it? So therefore the history of humanity, to reduce that to one story, would always have that kind of colonial element to it. And exactly what you were talking about before, where who defines freedom, who defines censorship, who defines right and wrong? Well, who defines history, who defines the story? It will always be wielded as a tool of power.
You don't think it's a trait of the human brain to actually seek out a narrative because it helps to digest what you're reading? The brain requires some sort of linear structure, doesn't it? Even though historical events are completely chaotic, aren't they? Because sometimes you need to reduce and create a simple narrative, but in doing that, it becomes actually quite dangerous because you can simplify things that are very complex.
Well, as to the question as to whether it's human nature, I don't know. It's certainly how we tend to teach history. It's certainly how we tend to describe the history of our own people or our own family or whatever to our children, and therefore that's the way they learn to talk about such things. I mean, it's sort of theoretically possible we could do a different kind of history, but I haven't really seen anyone doing it. You're right, everyone seems to do this thing of ultimately, even I do, sooner or later you form a narrative, and that narrative will be exclusive and therefore somewhat partial and subjective. I don't know if you could actually avoid that entirely.
I got a historical fact for you.
Come on then.
Go on.
Are you familiar with Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the 20th century theosophist?
I don't think so, no.
She invented the recipe for HP sauce. That's where the name comes from. Did you know that?
No.
Do you really recommend that people should buy condiments in monthly instalments anyway?
That is an awful joke.
When Alexander the Great cut the Gordian knot, do you know what I like about that incident, Tom?
I haven't a clue, no.
It's because that incident shows that if something's impossible, just do it another way.
What is this now, Oprah?
Don't you think?
He's got a beard and a big pecker. Is it Heretic? No, it's Tom Secker. And you can just squeeze it in.
Squeeze it in.
But I want to talk just briefly about, I was reading about the rise of all these far-right groups throughout Europe. In Hungary, we have the Jobbik movement. In France, the Front National. Norway, the Progress Party. Denmark, the People's Party. Holland, the Freedom Party. Austria, the Freedom Party. Finland, the Finns Party. And Greece, the Golden Dawn. What's going on, Tom?
Well, all of these things have been there for a long time. Eurofascism never went away. It's always been there in some form or another. I think you get all these headlines about the rise of such and such, and it's usually that means it's always been there, it's a little bit more active now, and suddenly the media's gone batshit over it.
Yeah.
That's what the rise of usually means. But at the same time, multiculturalism's sort of always been there, so I know what you mean by the difference between, the fact that there are different cultures and some sort of politicized multiculturalism. There's quite a distinction there, of course.
Tom,
Yeah.
I saw your lecture that you did in France.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I went to a foreign country.
Yeah. I thought you looked a bit like a Victorian Doctor Who.
It did. You just step out of the TARDIS and onto the stage.
Why? Because I was wearing a shirt and a scarf.
And a big Victorian beard.
Yeah.
I don't
You
have
look
a
nice,
big
don't you?
Victorian beard. I have like a 1970s porn beard.
So you haven't had any inside jobs lately then, Tom?
Not ones that I didn't have to pay for, no.
Anyway, sideways vagina. Tom, do you think that the likes of Jay-Z, Kesha, Beyonce, etc. are actually members of the Illuminati who are trying to convert the Western world to Satanism?
No. I think to a certain extent they know if they talk about this kind of thing, it creates a certain kind of buzz in a market that is growing. Whether they're doing that knowingly or whether they're just put up to it by their management or whatever, I think it's something along those sorts of lines. I don't buy into this notion that this is somehow people who trace back to the Bavarian Illuminati are telling Jay-Z what to wear and what to write songs about and that kind of crap. No. They're clearly quite aware of it. So, of course, they're going to feed this kind of stuff into their work. Whether they're doing it consciously or whether they're doing it for this reason or that reason, it will depend from person to person, won't it? It'll depend from artist to artist.
I want to ask you a little bit about conspiracy theorists and the independent media and about some of the assumptions that they make. Would you like to talk on that a little bit, Tom?
Well, you asked me what is the point in the alternative media, right? You asked me this in a YouTube message. The point of the alternative media is so that anyone can say basically any dumbass thing they like and not get called out on it, because no one in the alternative media really calls out other people on anything. Or not on a intellectual basis, not on a moral basis. The truth movement and the alternative media is basically a place where there are no standards of truth. And that's the problem. And I think a lot of dishonesty, a lot of personal dishonesty and intellectual dishonesty in the alternative media, and no one really ever confronts anyone over any of it. So, sorry to sound pessimistic, but it is what it is.
How do we define standards of evidence?
How do we moderate? Yes, it's something so kind of
fundamental.
Yeah.
Well, you do it in the same way that you would establish standards of any kind. If you wanted to say, how do we establish fairness? Well, you define it. You come up with a definition that you're happy with, and then you try and enforce it and try and test it out against things. And sooner or later you'll come up with something that doesn't work within your framework, and you'll either have to adapt it or admit my framework is limited to these sorts of things. I mean, scientific evidence is only really useful for answering scientific questions.
Yeah.
I do seem to drive a lot of my audience away.
That's a good thing, though. If you don't take risks, if you're not willing to challenge the ideas that your own listenership hold, then really you don't have any worth, do you? So I think that's where the true value is. But I was going to ask, I'm concerned that Snowden is not only maybe a double agent, but a triple agent or a quadruple agent, to the point where he's actually been assigned to spy on himself. He doesn't know.
Is this some sort of silly thing that Chris Morris put you up to?
This is the Conspiracy Shit Chat team, covering the globe from the boot of an old Morris Minor. Please destroy your computer after seeing this broadcast. Serious, not kidding.
Do you believe in chemtrails?
What do you mean? Do I believe that...
That's why it's an open question, because I believe that chemtrails aren't condensation trails, but whether that is a result of our climate changing or something that's in the condensation that's making it stay up in the air like that, I don't know. So I wonder what your thoughts were, because everyone has to go outside, don't they? It's kind of bad for everyone, isn't it, if you're trying to kill everyone from the air? There's lots of aspects of the whole chemtrail meme that I find a bit baffling.
With you on that, yeah, for sure. Like you, I don't buy that these are just ordinary condensation trails that you would expect, because they don't seem to behave in the same way. So therefore, you assume they aren't just the same thing. What that means they are, I have no idea. And you're right, there are easier ways of depopulating the world than that. It's not very energy efficient, it's not very economically efficient.
It's not very discriminatory.
Yeah, it would mean that all of these rich people, all of these Rockefellers and whoever are presumably doing this, would have to be going around taking lots of supplements to counteract the effect of the chemtrails.
Iodine. Alex Jones recommends iodine.
I bet he does. Recommends that you buy it from him.
Yeah. And a fucking water pump that costs only £4,000. I'd just rather get a bottle of Evian. It's cheaper, isn't it?
Your French is impeccable, Gibson.
Thank you.
How's James Corbett's cat?
James Corbett doesn't have a cat.
I saw. Robert Cato.
Now, I was reading in The Sun. I'm not proud of it. It was my dad's, not mine. And Terry Gilliam, the former Python, came out and said I think this Operation Yewtree thing is getting really out of hand, where people seem to be indiscriminately pulled into this cabal of paedophiles simply by association. Do you think there's something more sinister going on? I was thinking, was it Stalin, or was it maybe Pol Pot or something, where he would pick on the intellectuals and the celebrities of their day to provide a chilling effect for the regular proletariat? So anyway, Operation Yewtree, do you think there is something afoot?
I think it started out as a accidental expose of something that lots of people clearly already knew about, and that it's been turned around into a relatively targeted witch hunt that I'm not quite sure what's driving it. Like you say, there is that whole thing about, if the public sees that even celebrities can be caught doing horrible, nasty things and get accused of doing horrible, nasty things, then the state could find anyone. It does have that sort of omniscient security state thing running along in the background. I also think it's about traumatizing people. This whole investigation, aside from being a trying to lock the barn door after the horse has bolted issue, like I say, it has been twisted into something else. It's been twisted into something that is being inflicted on all of us publicly, because that's what it now seems to be about, is about generating lots and lots and lots of headlines.
Yeah.
That's what Operation Yewtree is now doing. They're not actually resolving any real problem, are they?
I remember back in my day, we didn't even have paedophiles. We had to buy our own fucking sweets.
Do you like these lyrics, Tom?
What, the ones that you just messaged me? So now they call me a Nazi. No, bitch, I'm just good at Yahtzee.
Yeah. Tom, do you watch The Walking Dead?
No.
Anarchism. Wouldn't it be a little bit like The Walking Dead?
Possibly. As we've just established, I don't fucking know.
I think you're right about this Ben Affleck thing. I think he's an agent of some sort.
Well, I say agent, I mean asset, perhaps. Someone who plays a role, someone who does the job that he's expected to do.
A useful idiot.
Oh, he's certainly that.
So I take it, Tom, that your views on UKIP have not softened late.
I'll soften on UKIP when they soften on everything they believe in. Frankly, when they stop doing things like blaming flooding on gay marriage.
Well, they do leak, don't they, the gays? When they leak, don't they, when they do it? A little bit.
Oh, nothing.
Are you suggesting Somerset is currently flooded? No.
By anal leakage.
Yeah.
You want to get the council on about that then and sort it out.
And now the weather for all areas of the British Isles, but definitely not Bongo Bongo land. You may have heard about a storm in a teacup that developed when a UKIP town councillor in Oxfordshire was suspended by my party after he blamed the floods on David Cameron's gay marriage bill. The old parties are seeking to cloud the big political issues of the day by focusing on the view of UKIP members like him, even though he'd said a deluge of similar things before when he was a Tory councillor. How quickly some things change depending on which way the wind blows. Now, if you look around the UK, you'll see there are outbreaks of sometimes balmy, occasionally extremist views from people of all political persuasions. In Whitby, the sun was apparently briefly obscured by a UFO after a Labour councillor claimed to have fathered a child with an extraterrestrial. He also says his real mother is a 9-foot green alien with 8 fingers. There were earth tremors in North Wales, where a Lib Dem councillor called John Larson was sentenced to 18 years in prison for setting off a series of explosions in the North Wales town of Denbigh. Talk about extremism. And the weather for those of you thinking about heading off for the slopes? Well, there were flurries of embarrassment for the Tories after MP Aidan Burley organised a Nazi-themed stag party at an alpine ski resort. Anyone thinking of heading off on holiday to Brussels this week, perhaps getting there on the gravy train, watch out for a warm front of relentless hot air. Back in Britain, and the long-range forecast, and we can see temperatures rising ahead of the European elections in May. It could get stormy, so I advise you to avoid light aircraft. We hope there'll be a sprinkling of real ale on lower-lying areas, outbreaks of common sense, and absolutely no chance of cyclonic fruitcakes.
You don't like books because they've got pages. You have one look and you think that'll take ages, so you don't read books. That's shocking. Book review.
Read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking book. So we're going to talk about films as well.
So we're going to talk about films as well. Oh, I love films. Pretty Woman, Shaving Ryan's Privates.
So what film did you want to talk about then?
First of all, I'd like to talk about a film by Francis Ford Coppola called The Conversation, which he made in 1974. He made it between The Godfather and Godfather Part 2. Awesome film about surveillance. Basically, there's a character called Harry Call, played by the amazing Gene Hackman. He plays this like surveillance expert. And this guy called the director hires Gene Hackman's character to spy on this couple. The whole film is about what he records during this conversation. It's really fractured and strange. And he spends the rest of the film trying to piece it together, and this whole kind of mystery unfolds. What's astonishing about the film is that at the time, Coppola was accused of using the same surveillance equipment as was used later on for the Watergate scandal. So this film got kind of embroiled in all of that. But the script was actually written before Watergate, but people think the film is about Watergate. And it's not. The camera work's amazing. A lot of it copies, you know, the way a CCTV camera kind of slowly goes from left to right. That film is where we are, essentially. And it's highly recommended. Like, watch it. It's brilliant. So, Heretic, have you been reading any books lately?
I've been reading The Science Delusion by Rupert Sheldrake. Not since reading Mein Kampf have I read a book that reminded me of how much I hate the modern world. It's fantastic. It's a remarkable book. In it, he sets out what he calls the 10 dogmas of modern science.
From what I know of Sheldrake, he kind of asks the questions that science either didn't think to ask or science finds too ridiculous to ask. He's taken the brave step of tackling things like ESP and group telepathy and taking it as a very serious thing.
In this book, he talks about DNA. According to Sheldrake, DNA isn't actually the be and end all. For example, the DNA for your left arm is the same as the DNA for your right arm. Obviously, your left and your right arm aren't the same. So where is the missing information in the DNA? Yeah. It's quite infuriating. You feel quite cheated when you read this book of how much you've had the wool pulled over your eyes by those popular science programs.
Right. I watched another film, Heretic.
You can't read.
No, I can't read. I watched THX 1138, George Lucas's debut film. Like, set in the 25th century. Basically, it's another one of these dystopian films about like an underground kind of closed society. And he's kind of an inmate. And he's got a shaved head and a white gown. It's a bit like an asylum. It's all very white and pristine, but it's basically a controlled world. The THX 1138 is his name. He lives a very robotic existence, really. He's a human being, but he's suppressed with lots of drugs. So he can't feel any emotion. The drugs just keep him really blunt and kind of vacant. Something happens along the way that affects his medication. Like, he stops taking his medication, basically, and starts to slowly become conscious. The administration realises something wrong with him when he makes a mistake at work. So the mistake he makes is serious, and they sort of arrest him, like these robotic android police. From then on, it's about his escape, really, to the surface. And films like The Truman Show were very influenced by it. And you can see early details that would have gone on to be in Star Wars. But a great film, again, pertinent to our times. Any other books you're reading?
I've been reading 1001 Nights.
Why are you doing it in that fucking Michael Caine sort of voice? The 1001 Nights. Or the Arabian Nights. You know, changes. So what is it then?
It's an anthology of fables, stories and poetry.
Jubbly.
The Quran and the Bible are very different in terms of the structure and style. So when you look at the Arabian Nights, in some ways it seems kind of like an Islamic answer to the Bible, in that it's building a folk culture and a mythology around Islam. It's hundreds and hundreds of stories. Some are short, some are epic. The better known stories are probably Aladdin, The Ebony Horse, Ali Baba, The Sinbad Voyages.
But it's got a problem with the birds, innit? Don't like the birds, the ladies.
Women in the book are basically just there to be rapined.
They're getting raped up, smacking bitches up.
Yeah, more or less.
It seems to me that since the 19th century, this particular work of literature has been very influential.
There's a lot of writers that have been influenced by it, like Chaucer, Lovecraft. One of the other things you notice when you read the Nights is how many plot devices you've seen in films seem to have derived from the Nights. Penguin have just released a new translation of the Nights. It's in 3 volumes and it's completely uncensored. It's pornographic, it's racist, it's misogynistic. It's right up my street, basically. Also read The Arabian Nights, A Companion by Robert Irwin.
Yeah, briefly mention Alejandro Jodorowsky's classic, The Holy Mountain. How can you describe this film? Like, it's the most visually beautiful and mental thing you've ever seen all at once. But somehow, in a mystical fashion, kind of tells a parable about our dilemma as human beings. What are we? How do we become illuminated? It's a bit like 2001: A Space Odyssey as well. Those two are very closely related, I reckon, using the same language. It's funny, it's perverse, it's perversely funny.
Yeah, I've been reading Richard Webster's Why Freud Was Wrong, Sin, Science and Psychoanalysis. And in reading this book, you realise that Freud's whole theory of psychoanalysis basically rests on the misdiagnosis of hysteria in his patients, when a lot of the time they were just suffering from epilepsy or some other biological problem. And you really do get the impression that he was the sort of person that would shape the evidence to fit his theories. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to talk about was this, The Jewish War by Josephus. And this is about the Jewish civil wars that broke out in the 1st century AD and the Romans' suppression of it. If you want to understand the book of Revelation from the Bible, then read this book.
Okay. Because the Revelation is notoriously difficult, isn't it?
Read something academic, like the Yale Anchor Bible commentary on the book of Revelation.
As I close the book's pages, this segment took fucking ages, but it's over. Yeah, books, don't be scared, folks, don't be scared. No.
You could hit people with them.
You could, yeah. Do a Godfrey Bloom. So tunes, about tunage. Any tunes you're listening to? Songs, music, beats?
From Fear to Eternity by Iron Maiden and the new Lady Gaga album. What have you been listening to?
The Arcade Fire. And a guy called John Mouse. You like him?
Well, that draws this episode of Conspiracy Shit Chat to a close.
We've learned that chemtrails might not be chemtrails. They might just be ghost snakes. We've also learned that Russell Brand really does mean well. He just wants us all to get along, doesn't he?
And die in a riot. Right, he fucks off to the countryside.
Yeah.
We also learned that science is shit.
It's twaddle. Fucking twaddle.
Just make it up.
Follow the money, people. Follow the money.
So Nelson Mandela died and joined the pantheon of modern saints.
Yeah, it was sad about Mandela. I heard about this whole bunch of people who were trying to pay tribute to him, ended up going to a Nissan main dealer. Nissan main dealership.
Cars.
It's a grower. I think that's what we're trying to establish. The joke's a grower. Can you imagine that? The joke's that shit.
Yeah, that's the grow. Lies have long legs.
They do.
This is a walkthrough video of GTA 5. These games are fantastic. Look at the graphics, the draw distances. Out of the way, man! You know, Super Mario's, you know. All he does is jump around, eat mushrooms. Last time I ate a mushroom, I went Disneyland. I hijacked the supermarket trolley. I got stuck on the M25 for 6 days. Bam! Eat my roadkill, shitface.
I love films. I like the films.
Just get a gun.
Let's get a gun. I can't get a gun in this country.
It's the wrong colour.
What's this thing you are cutting that out?
I'm not telling you either of those things. What are you trying to do? Crack my password to my email? I'm not fucking stupid.
I've got a book coming out, yeah.
You write a self-help book for, closet fascists. It'd be hilarious.